The 32nd floor
no
smelled of
comes near
sterile
my
air and
mother."
expensive roses. Charles Wentworth's voice cut through the silence like glass. I said no one comes near my mother. His suit cost more than most people earned in a year. His anger, priceless. Beside the hospital bed stood Evelyn, the cleaning woman head bowed. Next to her, a 13-year-old girl clutched a worn notebook. Margaret Wentworth lay motionless, eyes half open, staring at nothing. "Security!" Charles roared, but the girl didn't run. She stepped forward, raised her hands, and began to sign in the air. Margaret's lips trembled. Tears spilled down her cheeks. A question echoed through the room. When the world only hears money, who listens to the language of the heart? Don't look away. A child is about to silence an entire building. Evelyn cleaned the VIP rooms every morning before sunrise. She followed the rules: no talking, no eye contact with patients, no questions. Invisible. That's what cleaners were supposed to be. Her daughter Lila came along during summer break. The girl sat in corners reading scribbling in an old leather notebook that once belonged to her grandfather. He'd been a sign language interpreter for deaf veterans. Before he died, he wrote on the first page, "When someone cannot hear, let your eyes speak for your heart." Lila carried those words everywhere. Margaret Wentworth had been admitted 3 weeks ago after a stroke. The doctors said she'd suffered severe damage to her language center. No speech, no response. Half her body paralyzed. But Lila noticed something the doctors didn't. Every time a nurse spoke, Margaret's eyes followed the movement of their lips, like she was trying to read them. One morning, Lila smiled at her. Margaret blinked. Once. Clear and deliberate. Lila's heart raced. She turned to her mother. "Mom, can I stay a little longer?" Evelyn's face tightened with fear. "No, they don't like strangers near the patients. I just want to say hello." Lila. Too late. The floor manager appeared in the doorway, arms crossed. "What are you doing in here?" Evelyn stammered. "I'm sorry, sir. She was just leaving." "Make sure she does. Mrs. Wentworth is not to be disturbed." They were escorted out like criminals. But as they walked down the hall, Lila glanced back through the glass door. Margaret was looking at her. Not at the ceiling. Not at nothing. At her. Her eyes were pleading. Weak. Desperate. Lila stopped. Evelyn tugged her arm. "Come on, baby. We can't lose this job." Lila didn't move. She pressed her palm against the glass door and slowly raised her other hand. She signed, "I see you." Inside the room, Margaret blinked twice. 2 blinks. That was the sign for yes in the language of the deaf. Lila's breath caught in her throat. She knew. Margaret wasn't lost in silence. She was trapped in it. That night, Lila couldn't sleep. She opened her grandfather's notebook and read his words again and again. "When someone cannot hear, let your eyes speak for your heart." But what if someone could hear and no one was listening? The next morning, she returned to the hospital with her mother. This time, she brought the notebook. She didn't ask permission. She walked straight to Margaret's room and stood by the window just outside the door. Margaret's eyes found her immediately. Lila signed through the glass. "Can you understand me?" 2 blinks. "Are you afraid?" 2 blinks. "Do you want help?" Margaret's entire face trembled. Tears rolled down her cheeks. 2 blinks. A security guard noticed. "Hey kid, step away from there." Evelyn rushed over, grabbing Lila's hand. "Please, we're leaving." But Lila had already seen enough. Margaret wasn't brain damaged. She was awake, aware, alive. And she was trying to tell them something. As they were led toward the elevator, Lila whispered to her mother, "She's not mute, Mom. She's signing." Evelyn looked at her daughter, eyes wide with fear and confusion. "What do you mean, she's speaking? Just not with words." The elevator doors closed. But through the narrow window, Lila saw Margaret raise her hand, just slightly trembling, and fold her fingers into a shape. It was the sign for help. The next morning, Charles Wentworth arrived with an entourage. 3 doctors, 2 lawyers. A private nurse named Rachel who wore pearls and moved like she owned the room. Lila and her mother were cleaning the hallway when the group swept past them without a glance. Through the open door, Lila heard everything. "We need to adjust the sedatives," one doctor said. "She's showing no improvement." "I think it's time we consider specialized home care," another added. Charles nodded, arms crossed. "Whatever keeps her comfortable. I want her home by the end of the week." Lila froze. She watched Margaret's eyes. Every time someone said the word home, her pupils contracted, sharp, fast, fear. Lila stepped closer to the doorway, notebook in hand. She scribbled quickly, pupils shrink when home is mentioned. Left hand twitches. Margaret's gaze locked onto her. Lila signed from across the room. "You don't want to go." Margaret closed her eyes twice. "No." The head doctor turned and noticed her. "Who is this child?" "She's nobody," the floor manager said, appearing behind Lila. "She shouldn't be here." But Lila didn't move. She looked straight at Charles. "She understands us. She's reading your lips." The room went silent. Then Charles laughed, cold, sharp, dismissive. "That's the maid's daughter. Don't let her make a scene." He waved toward the door. "Security. Escort them out." Evelyn grabbed Lila's arm, tears streaming down her face. "Please, baby. Let's go." "But Mom." "Now." They were pulled toward the hallway. But as they passed the bed, Margaret's hand moved. It was slow, trembling, barely visible. Her fingers curled and stretched, forming shapes in the air. "Wait." No one saw it. No one except Lila. She twisted free from her mother's grip and ran back to the bedside, dropping to her knees. "She's not mute, sir. She's signing." Charles's face darkened. He slammed his hand on the table. "Enough security." Two guards stepped forward, but then it happened. Margaret's eyes filled with tears. They spilled over, running down her temples. Her hand rose again, shaking violently, and she repeated the same gesture. "Wait." Lila signed back, her own hands trembling. "I'm here. I see you." Margaret's fingers moved again. Slower this time. Deliberate. S-O-N. Then D-A-N-G-E-R. Lila's heart pounded. One of the younger doctors, Dr. Sam Holden, stepped closer. He'd been watching in silence. "Wait," he said, raising a hand. "Stop. Everyone stop." Charles turned on him. "Excuse me." Dr. Sam ignored him. He walked to the bed and looked at Margaret. "Can you repeat that?" Lila signed the question. Margaret's hand moved again. D-A-N-G-E-R. Dr. Sam pulled out his phone and started recording. "This isn't reflex. This is intentional communication." Charles's jaw tightened. "You're basing a diagnosis on a child's interpretation." "I'm basing it on observable neurological response," Dr. Sam shot back. He turned to the team. "Get an EEG monitor in here, now, and stop all sedatives immediately." Nurse Rachel stepped forward, her voice smooth. "Doctor, that's not protocol." "I don't care. Do it." The room erupted into chaos. Charles stood rigid, his face pale. "This is absurd." But Dr. Sam was already setting up equipment. He placed electrodes on Margaret's head and pulled up the monitor. "Lila," he said, "sign something, anything." Lila took a breath. She signed, "What is your son's name?" Margaret's eyes focused. The EEG spiked. Her hand moved. "Charles." The monitor lit up with activity. Clean. Sharp. Unmistakable. Dr. Sam stared at the screen, then at Charles. "She's not brain damaged. She's trapped." Charles said nothing. His hands were shaking. Lila signed again. "Who are you afraid of?" Margaret's eyes darted toward Nurse Rachel. Her fingers spelled slowly, H-E-R. Rachel's face went white. Dr. Sam turned to her. "What medications have you been administering?" "Only what was prescribed." "Show me the chart." Rachel hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Security stepped toward her instead. Charles finally spoke, his voice barely a whisper. "What have you done to my mother?" Rachel backed toward the door, but the guards blocked her path. Margaret's hand reached out, trembling, and Lila took it gently. She signed, You're safe now. And for the first time in weeks, Margaret smiled. The machines beeped steadily. The room stood frozen. Charles sank into a chair, his head in his hands. Outside, rain began to fall against the window. Lila stayed by the bed, holding Margaret's hand as the world finally began to listen. Dr. Sam Holden didn't sleep that night. He sat in his office reviewing every medication log, every nurse's note, every sedative dose Margaret Wentworth had received over the past 3 weeks. The patterns were there, hidden, but there. The next morning he called Lila into a conference room. "I need your help," he said. "You see things we don't." Lila opened her grandfather's notebook. "What do you want me to look for?" "Patterns, fear responses, anything that happens when Rachel is in the room." They pulled up security footage from the past week. Lila watched carefully. Every time Rachel entered Margaret's room, something shifted. Margaret's pupils dilated. Her left hand twitched. Her heart rate spiked on the monitor. But when other nurses came in, nothing changed. "She's afraid of her," Lila whispered. "Every single time." Dr. Sam leaned forward. "Why would she be afraid of her own nurse?" Lila pointed at the screen. "Look, Rachel always injects the sedative herself. She never lets anyone else do it." Dr. Sam scrolled through the logs. "You're right. Every dose administered to Margaret in the last 2 weeks was given by Rachel. No exceptions." "That's not normal, is it?" "No, it's not." He pulled up the medication records. According to this, Margaret is on standard post-stroke sedatives. Low dose. But her symptoms suggest something much stronger. Lila flipped through her notes. Every time Rachel gives her the shot, Mrs. Wentworth's breathing slows down. Her pupils shrink, and her hand stops moving for hours. Dr. Sam's face darkened. "That's not sedation. That's paralysis." He stood abruptly. "We need a blood test. Now." That afternoon, Dr. Sam ordered a full toxicology screen. Charles Wentworth was called into the room. He arrived looking exhausted, his tie loosened, his eyes red. "What's going on?" he asked. Dr. Sam handed him a tablet. "Your mother's blood work came back. She has elevated levels of benzodiazepines far beyond what we prescribed, and traces of succinylcholine." Charles stared at the screen. "What does that mean?" "It means someone has been giving her muscle relaxants, deliberately, in high doses." The room went silent. Charles's voice was hollow. "Who?" Dr. Sam glanced at Lila, then back at Charles. "We believe it's Nurse Rachel." "That's impossible. She's been with our family for years. She was recommended by—" He stopped. His face went pale. "By my lawyer." Lila spoke quietly. "Sir, has anyone talked to you about your mother's will recently?" Charles turned to her, confused. "What?" "The day I first saw Mrs. Wentworth, I heard Rachel talking to someone on the phone. She said, once the old woman's signs were set." Dr. Sam pulled up another document. "Your mother is the sole trustee of the Wentworth Foundation. $800 million. If she's declared mentally incompetent, control transfers to her designated proxy." Charles's jaw clenched. "Who's the proxy?" "According to the legal documents filed last month, Rachel Moreira." The air left the room. Charles stood frozen, his hands trembling. "She was going to kill my mother." "Not kill," Dr. Sam said grimly. "Trap. Keep her alive but incapacitated. Just aware enough to seem brain dead but unable to communicate. The perfect vegetative state." Lila felt sick. Charles turned to her, his voice breaking. "How did you know?" "I didn't," Lila said. "I just listened." An hour later, Rachel walked into Margaret's room with her usual tray of medication. She smiled her perfect smile. "Good afternoon, Mrs. Wentworth. Time for your evening dose." She didn't notice Dr. Sam standing in the corner, or the 2 security officers outside the door, or Lila sitting quietly by the window, notebook open. Rachel prepared the syringe, her movements smooth and practiced. But Lila saw it. The needle tip wasn't sealed. "Wait!" Lila shouted. Rachel froze. Dr. Sam stepped forward. Let me see that. Rachel's smile faltered. It's just the standard sedative. Then you won't mind if I check. He took the syringe from her hand. Rachel's face went pale. The pharmacy must have made a mistake. Dr. Sam held the vial up to the light. This isn't what's on the prescription. This is succinylcholine. Undiluted. Rachel backed toward the door. I don't know how that got there. Stop. Charles's voice was ice. He stood in the doorway blocking her path. Don't say another word. Security stepped in. Rachel's hands shook. Charles, please. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. His voice cracked. You tried to steal my mother's life. Rachel was handcuffed and escorted out. The room fell silent. Margaret lay in the bed, tears streaming down her face. Lila knelt beside her and signed gently. It's over. You're safe. Margaret's hand rose slowly. Her fingers trembled as they formed the words, Thank you. Charles stood at the foot of the bed staring at his mother. For the first time in weeks, he saw her. Really saw her. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I should have listened. Margaret's eyes met his. She signed weakly, I forgive you. Dr. Sam began administering a counteragent to flush the toxins from her system. Within minutes, Margaret's breathing steadied. Her fingers moved more easily. The monitor stabilized. Lila stayed beside her, holding her hand, signing softly, Breathe, breathe. Outside, the rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, flooding the room with light. Charles sank into a chair and buried his face in his hands. Lila reached into her bag and pulled out her grandfather's notebook. She placed it gently on Margaret's chest. The words on the first page were clear. To those who listen, even silence speaks. Margaret smiled through her tears, and for the first time in 3 weeks, she was truly heard. The toxicology report hit Charles like a freight train. He sat in Dr. Sam's office staring at the numbers. 3 weeks of slow poisoning. 3 weeks of his mother screaming silently for help while he signed paperwork and took business calls. How long does she have? His voice was barely audible. Dr. Sam leaned forward. The good news is we caught it in time. But her system is saturated. We need to flush the drugs carefully or we could trigger respiratory failure. Charles looked up. What do you need? Time. Monitoring. And honestly, Dr. Sam glanced toward the hallway where Lila sat with her mother. That kid. Your mother responds to her. She stays calm when Lila's around. That matters medically. Charles nodded slowly. Whatever she needs. That night, Lila was allowed to stay in Margaret's room. She sat in a chair by the window, notebook open, watching the monitors like a hawk. Margaret's vitals were unstable. Her heart rate spiked and dropped unpredictably as the antidotes battled the toxins in her blood. At 11 p.m., the alarms went off. Margaret's breathing became shallow. Her lips turned pale. Nurses rushed in. Dr. Sam was right behind them. She's going into respiratory distress, he barked. Get the crash cart. Lila jumped up, her heart pounding. Margaret's eyes were wide, panicked, darting around the room. Lila pushed past a nurse and grabbed Margaret's hand. She signed frantically, Look at me. Breathe with me. Margaret's eyes locked onto hers. Lila took a deep breath in, slow and exaggerated, then let it out. In, out, in, out. Margaret tried to follow. Her chest rose slightly. Dr. Sam worked quickly, adjusting IV lines, administering oxygen, calling out orders. But Margaret kept her eyes on Lila. The girl kept signing, kept breathing, kept holding her hand. You're safe. I'm here. Breathe. Slowly, Margaret's rhythm steadied. The monitor's shrill beeping softened into a regular pulse. Dr. Sam exhaled. She's stabilizing. The nurses stepped back, checking vitals, adjusting equipment. Lila didn't let go. She kept signing, You did it. You're okay. Margaret's lips moved. No sound came out, but Lila could read them. Thank you. By dawn, Margaret was out of danger. Charles arrived at 6 a.m., still in yesterday's clothes. He looked like he'd aged 10 years overnight. He stood in the doorway watching Lila asleep in the chair, still holding his mother's hand. Dr. Sam appeared beside him. She didn't leave all night. Charles swallowed hard. I didn't even know her name until 2 days ago. Her name is Lila Chen. She's 13. And she saved your mother's life. Charles stepped into the room and gently touched Lila's shoulder. She woke with a start. Is she okay? She's stable, thanks to you. He paused. I need to ask you something. How did you know? Lila rubbed her eyes. I didn't know, I just watched. My grandfather taught me that people who can't speak still tell you everything. You just have to pay attention. Charles looked at his mother, frail and small, in the hospital bed. I stopped paying attention a long time ago. Margaret's eyes opened. She looked at her son and signed slowly. You're here now. Charles didn't understand the gesture. Lila translated. She says you're here now. That's what matters. Charles's face crumpled. He knelt beside the bed and took his mother's other hand. I'm so sorry, Mom. I should have protected you. Margaret shook her head gently. She signed again. Lila's voice was soft. She says, I forgive you. But listen now. Charles nodded, tears streaming down his face. I will, I promise. 2 floors down, Rachel Morera sat in a hospital security office, handcuffed to a chair. Police detectives had arrived. Financial records were being subpoenaed. Her lawyer was on the way, but it didn't matter. The evidence was overwhelming. Altered medication logs, bank transfers from an offshore account, emails discussing incapacitation timelines, and trust fund access windows. She'd been planning this for 18 months. The lead detective closed his folder. You almost pulled it off. If it wasn't for a 13-year-old kid, you'd be a very rich woman right now. Rachel said nothing. Outside the window, the sun rose over Manhattan. Back in Margaret's room, Dr. Sam briefed the family on next steps. We'll keep her here for another week, monitoring her recovery. The paralytic drugs should clear her system in 72 hours. After that, we'll start speech therapy and physical rehabilitation. Charles nodded. Whatever she needs. Cost is not an issue. Dr. Sam smiled. Actually, the biggest factor in her recovery isn't money. It's communication. He looked at Lila. If you're willing, we'd like you to work with our team. Teach us what you know. Lila's eyes widened. Me. You've done more for this patient in 3 days than we did in 3 weeks. We need to learn from you. Evelyn, standing quietly in the corner, spoke for the first time. She has school. We'll work around her schedule, Dr. Sam said. And we'll pay her. As a consultant. Lila looked at her mother, then at Margaret, then at the notebook in her lap. She thought of her grandfather's words. Let your eyes speak for your heart. Okay, she said quietly. I'll help. Margaret signed from the bed, her movements stronger now. Thank you. Lila signed back, smiling through tears. You're welcome. Charles stood and extended his hand to Lila. She shook it. You gave me my mother back, he said. I will never forget that. Lila looked him in the eye. Sometimes her silence tells the loudest truth. You just have to be willing to hear it. The room fell quiet. Outside, the city hummed with life. But in that moment in that room, everyone finally understood what it meant to listen. The press conference was held in the hospital's main auditorium. Charles Wentworth stood at the podium, flanked by hospital administrators Dr. Sam Holden and a team of lawyers. Behind them, projected on a massive screen, was a single photograph: Margaret in her hospital bed signing, "I love you," to the camera. The room was packed with reporters, cameras flashing lights. Charles cleared his throat. His hands gripped the edges of the podium. 3 weeks ago, my mother suffered a stroke. I was told she had severe brain damage, that she would never communicate again. He paused, his voice shaking. I believed them. I stopped listening. The room was silent. But a 13-year-old girl didn't stop. She saw what we missed. She heard what we ignored. And because of her, my mother is alive and recovering. He turned and gestured toward the back of the room. Lila sat between her mother and Margaret, who was now in a wheelchair wrapped in a soft blanket. Every camera in the room turned toward them. Lila wanted to disappear, but Margaret reached over and took her hand. She signed slowly, "Stay." Lila stayed. Charles continued. "I also learned that someone I trusted, someone I paid to care for my mother, tried to steal her life, her voice, and her fortune." His jaw tightened. "Rachel Moreira has been arrested and charged with attempted murder, fraud, and elder abuse. The investigation is ongoing." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "But I'm not here to talk about her. I'm here to talk about what happens next." He clicked a remote. The screen changed. A new image appeared, a logo with two hands forming a heart. Below it, the words, "The Margaret Wentworth Foundation for Nonverbal Patient Advocacy." My mother was trapped in silence because we didn't know how to listen. How many others are trapped right now? How many patients lie in hospitals, nursing homes, care facilities, fully conscious, fully aware, but unable to speak? He looked directly at Lila. "This foundation will train medical staff in nonverbal communication. We'll fund research into locked-in syndrome, stroke recovery, and alternative communication methods. And we'll create a scholarship program for young people who want to study medical interpretation and patient advocacy." The screen changed again. A scholarship certificate appeared with Lila's name at the top. Lila's eyes went wide. Charles stepped away from the podium and walked toward her. The cameras followed. He knelt in front of her wheelchair. "Lila Chen, you saved my mother. You taught me how to see her again." His voice cracked. "I want to make sure you can teach others. Full scholarship. Any university. Any program. Medical school, linguistics, interpretation, whatever you choose." Lila couldn't speak. Evelyn covered her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Margaret signed to Lila. "Say yes." Lila looked at her mother, who nodded through her tears. Then she looked back at Charles and signed, "Thank you." The room erupted in applause. After the conference, they gathered in a private room. No cameras, no reporters, just family. Charles sat across from Evelyn, his hands folded. "I owe you an apology too. I treated you like you were invisible. I was wrong." Evelyn shook her head. "You were scared for your mother. I understand. That's no excuse." He pulled an envelope from his jacket. "This is a year's salary, with a raise, and I'd like to offer you a position managing the housekeeping staff at the Foundation's new facility." Evelyn stared at the envelope. "Sir, I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it." She nodded, unable to find words. Margaret, sitting beside Lila, signed something. Dr. Sam, who'd been learning basic signs all week, translated. She says, "The people who see us when we're invisible are the ones who change the world." Lila smiled and signed back, "I learned that from you." A week later, the story went viral. Not because of the scandal, not because of the money, but because of a 15-second video. It showed Lila sitting beside Margaret's hospital bed. Margaret signed, "What do you want to be when you grow up?" Lila signed back, "Someone who listens." Margaret smiled and signed, "You already are." The video was shared millions of times. Comments poured in from families with nonverbal loved ones, from nurses, from patients who felt unseen. One comment read, "My grandfather had a stroke last year. We thought he couldn't understand us. After seeing this, we tried signing. He cried. He's been trying to talk to us for months. Thank you." Another, "I'm a speech therapist and I've been doing this all wrong. This little girl just changed my entire practice." Lila didn't read the comments. She was too busy working. Dr. Sam had hired her officially. 3 days a week, she visited patients in the neurology ward, teaching nurses and families how to recognize nonverbal communication cues. She carried her grandfather's notebook everywhere. On the last page, she'd added a new line, "Silence is not empty. It's full of answers if you're brave enough to listen." On her last day at the hospital before starting high school, Lila returned to Margaret's room. Margaret was sitting up now, able to move both arms, working with a speech therapist to regain partial voice function. When she saw Lila, she signed, "My teacher." Lila laughed and signed back, "My friend." They sat together in comfortable silence, watching the city lights flicker on as the sun set. No words needed. Just presence. Just listening. 1 year later. Boston Convention Center packed with over 2,000 medical professionals. The banner stretched across the stage: Global Medical Communication Summit. Listening beyond sound. Lila stood backstage wearing a simple blue dress her mother had bought for the occasion. Her hands trembled as she clutched her grandfather's notebook. Dr. Sam appeared beside her. Nervous, terrified, he smiled. Good. That means it matters. He nodded toward the stage. You've got this. Just tell them what you told us. The moderator's voice echoed through the hall. Our next speaker is 14 years old. She has no medical degree, no formal training. But she saved a life by doing something radical. She paid attention. Please welcome Lila Chen. Applause filled the room. Lila walked onto the stage, blinking against the lights. In the front row sat Charles and Margaret. Margaret was walking now with a cane and could speak in short sentences. She waved. Lila's fear melted away. She stepped up to the microphone. A year ago, I was just a maid's daughter sitting in a hospital hallway. Her voice was steady. I wasn't supposed to be in that room. I wasn't supposed to notice. But I did. She clicked the remote. Margaret's photo appeared on the screen behind her. This is Mrs. Margaret Wentworth. Doctors said she had severe brain damage, but she didn't. She was fully conscious, fully aware. She just couldn't speak. The room was silent. We almost lost her because nobody was listening. Not to her body. Not to her eyes. Not to the patterns. Lila pulled up a slide showing pupil dilation charts, heart rate monitors, hand movement recordings. These are the signs we missed: fear, pain, awareness. She advanced to the next slide, a list of statistics. In the US alone, over 40,000 patients are diagnosed with locked-in syndrome or severe aphasia every year. How many of them are actually conscious? How many are trying to communicate while we talk over them, around them, about them? Doctors in the audience shifted uncomfortably. I'm not here to blame anyone. I'm here to ask us all to do better. She looked directly at the crowd. We saved one life by signing. But maybe we can save thousands by listening. The screen changed to show footage of the Margaret Wentworth Center for Nonverbal Patients, a brand new wing of Manhattan Private Hospital. Nurses moved through rooms where patients were being taught basic sign language. Families sat beside beds learning to read eye movements and hand gestures. This center opened 6 months ago. We've already helped over 200 patients communicate. Some signed, some blinked, some squeezed hands. But all of them were heard. She clicked again. A video played an elderly man spelling out "I love you" with eye blinks to his weeping daughter. There wasn't a dry eye in the auditorium. My grandfather used to say, "To those who listen, even silence speaks." I didn't understand it then, but I do now. Lila closed her notebook and looked out at the sea of faces. You don't need a medical degree to see someone. You just need to care enough to look. The room exploded in applause, a standing ovation. Lila stepped back from the microphone, overwhelmed. Margaret stood in the front row, tears streaming down her face. She signed across the distance. Proud of you. Lila signed back, I learned from the best. After the talk, journalists swarmed her. Will you go to medical school? Are you working on more research? What's next for the foundation? Lila answered politely, but her eyes kept drifting to the back of the room where her mother stood beaming with pride. When the crowd finally cleared, Evelyn walked over and hugged her daughter tightly. Your grandfather would be so proud. Lila held up the notebook. I think he already knows. They walked out together into the Boston Evening Pass banners, announcing the new training protocols, the expanded scholarship programs, the international partnerships forming around a simple idea. Listen. Even when there are no words. Behind them, the convention center glowed against the darkening sky. Inside, 2,000 doctors were learning to hear what they'd been missing all along, and it all started because one girl refused to look away. Sunset over New York City. Lila sat by the window of their small apartment, the golden light streaming across her grandfather's notebook. She opened it to the last page and wrote, Not everyone who loses their voice loses their words. Not everyone with words knows how to listen. Her mother poured 2 cups of tea and sat beside her. Long day. Lila shook her head, smiling. Good day. Evelyn kissed her daughter's forehead. I'm proud of you, baby. every single day. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the city lights blink on one by one. Lila's phone buzzed. A video message. She opened it. Margaret sat in her living room, surrounded by books and flowers. Her speech was still slow, but clear. "Hello, my dear Lila." She paused, then switched to sign language, her hands steady and sure. "The world hears you now, but I heard you first." She smiled. "Thank you for teaching me that silence can be powerful. That being unseen doesn't mean being unimportant. You changed my life." Margaret placed her hand over her heart. "And you changed the world." The video ended. Lila felt tears sting her eyes, but she was smiling. She looked at her mother. "Do you think Grandpa knew that his notebook would do all this?" Evelyn touched the worn leather cover. "I think he knew that the right person would find it, and use it the way it was meant to be used." Lila closed the notebook and held it to her chest. Outside the city hummed, millions of voices, millions of stories. But Lila had learned something most people never did. The loudest truth isn't always spoken. Sometimes it's signed. Sometimes it's blinked. Sometimes it's just a hand reaching out in the dark, hoping someone will hold on. She turned to the camera as if speaking directly to you. "I wasn't a doctor. I wasn't a genius. I was just a maid's daughter who listened when no one else did. And that was enough." The screen faded to black, but the message remained. Listen. Even in silence. Especially in silence. Have you ever felt too small to make a difference? Remember Lila. She used only her hands and her heart, but she made the whole world listen. If this story touched you, leave a comment for her. Tell us about a time when someone truly heard you, or when you finally heard someone else. Because every voice matters, even the silent ones.